We're going to look at some other issues of lack of flourishing or transformational development needs. And a lot of these fall in with the Millennium Development Goals as well. So one of them is education. Nearly 1 billion people entered the 21st century illiterate, 1 in 6 people. Less than 1% of the world spent, of what the world spent on weapons was needed to put every child in school, and yet it didn't happen. I'm going to get into some numbers later of what would the cost be of solving these issues, like bringing food to the world, bringing clean water to the world, bringing education to the world. And yet there is an education inequity in the sense that, if certain nations, the illiteracy rate of women can be 50%, 80%, 90%. But for any nation, for the illiteracy rate to be higher than 1 or 2% is really solvable and is inequitable. The nation where we worked for our 10 years was an example of that. Maybe 25% of people were able to read and write. And where we worked up in the mountains, nearly nobody could. And so that does lead to the inability to enter the marketplace, the inability to have political voice. In some ways, they were flourishing because they were agriculturalists and didn't necessarily see the need for education. But on the other hand, they also did not have as long of a lifespan because of lack of access to healthcare, which had to do with lack of access to money, which had to do with their lack of access to education. Okay, infectious diseases. You know that malaria has killed more people than anything else throughout history, with nearly 1 million fatalities every year, nearly 350 to 500 million cases of malaria. And as you know, this is mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. It's another problem which is not necessarily entirely solvable without DDT, but is... Interestingly, the island where we worked on was just to the south of us. They were able to eradicate malaria entirely through DDT, and then by screening every person who landed on the island for malaria, they were able to keep it off. Of course, the Bill Gates Foundation has made this its top priority and is working on alternate chemicals to sterilize mosquitoes to decrease the spread. And there have been other NGOs that work on spreading mosquito nets around the world. But those mosquito nets sometimes end up being used for other things, as you probably know. Okay, water problems affecting half the world. Nearly 2.6 billion lack at basic sanitation, meaning flush toilets and the ability to wash hands. Nearly 1 billion, or 1 in 6 people have lack of access to clean water. As you know, having problems with sanitation and water leads to intestinal parasite problems and multiple other health problems, typhoid, and certain amoebas and other problems. So this is, again, something that could be solved with more wells being dug and better collection and better distribution of water. There's really no such thing as famines. It's political famines, not people corrupt, not spreading the resources. There's no such thing really as droughts. If you consider we have enough water globally, it's just unjust structures in how the water is distributed and the sanitation is distributed. No such thing as a lack of literacy, in a sense. It's not that literacy is missing, it's that people have unfair access to education or inequitable access to education. So all of these things can be solved. 1 billion people living in urban slums, and you're aware of these and of the health problems and problems with gender inequity in those slums, having to do with rape and certainly rampant drug use. So these are the types of issues that transformational development workers look at. Just to consider why income is so much a part of that. If you look at this, I know that you can't see the data well, but this looks at the per capita income from 0 up to $40,000 a year. and then the life expectancy. And as you can see, nations where the income is less than $10,000 a year per person, the life expectancy tends to be significantly lower. You can see Swaziland down at the bottom, Lesotho, nations where per capita income is under $10,000 and where life expectancy is under 50 or even under 40. Zambia lists under 40. Angola, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, very low income per person and low life expectancy, and Central Africa Republic, Liberia, Congo, DR. And now, where if you go to the top right, where the average income is $40,000 and the life expectancy is 80, USA, Ireland, Norway. And so this is not a complete one-to-one ratio that more income leads to a longer lifespan. You can see that there are not really any nations on this list where people are making $40,000 a year and dying at age 40 or 50 or 60. I mean, some of them are, of course, but I mean, where the life expectancy is in the 40, 50, 60s. But there are nations where life expectancy is low, and yet, I'm sorry, where life expectancy is high, maybe in the 70 or 80 years even, or high 70s, and where income is low. And those are countries where there is flourishing without a lot of economic activity. So a lot of these are in South America: Chile, Costa Rica, Cuba, Uruguay, Belize, all have very long lifespans and low incomes because subsistence agriculture is possible. Maybe other issues. It's possible to have some education, literacy, healthcare choices, clean water, and food that ensure a longer lifespan without having great incomes. But that's not possible in other parts of the world. Okay, so what do we make of all these problems? Just to recap, we looked at inequitable education, inequitable incomes, inequitable access to water, to healthcare, urban slums, and really think that rather than being pessimistic, we can see opportunities. We can use our compassion to move us to address these issues, to educate ourselves on the biblical ethic of advocacy and of gleaning, of both the rehabilitation and the relief. So the spies who saw the land of Canaan many of them were pessimistic. They saw giants and they didn't want to go in. But we can have the faith of Joshua and Caleb and say we can conquer those giants, and that God has given us opportunities globally to bring justice, to be the advocate of the widow, of the fatherless, and to really see God work miraculous transformation in these nations and in these communities as women become literate, as they enter the workplace, as girls and boys begin to dream about better opportunities, and as we see the lifespans increase. Where we moved into our village, 5 women had died from childbirth the year that we entered there, and no woman died from childbirth the next 10 years. And we saw the literacy rates skyrocket. We saw the number of children going to school go from 0 to nearly 100%. That wasn't all because of our influence. It was largely because of globalization, because people were beginning to understand global trends and wanting to not necessarily enter the marketplace, but to ride the wave of, better medicines, better opportunities through education. So with that, of course, entering the global marketplace leads to other problems that capitalism brings with it. Dissatisfaction and disruption to their social structures, as some people earn money and others didn't. But in general, we saw a lot of development, as we saw people being more interested in education and healthcare. We had a woman who came and she said, I'm going to trust God, I'm going to use your medicine, because she saw that medicine took as much faith as using her shaman. Normally Americans wouldn't think of using medicine as an act of faith, but for her, the act of faith was not trusting in her shaman, but was to trust in medicines instead. And so we would have people who were more certain that when they broke a bone that their own shamans could solve it, and others who were willing to try out the healthcare system. But definitely when women were giving birth, they began to trust the hospital system because they had seen so many women die from childbirth in the village. So there's good news. You do see advancement, don't you? All right, I encourage you to think about what transformational development needs are in your area, what plagues your area, and what's on your heart. It could be the rebels and tyrants in certain parts of Africa. It could be mental illnesses. It could be developmental delays for children or for adults, and it could be any one of the things I discussed here.